Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's webinar and podcast series, Israel Insider with Alex Selsky. I'm Stacey Roman, and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to have Alex Selsky, Senior Advisor to MEF's Israel Victory Project and lecturer at Hadassah Academic College, join us this week to update us on the top events going on in Israel.
Mhm.
Mr. Selsky will be giving us a briefing on current Israeli affairs for 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I'll turn the discussion over to Mr. Alex Selsky.
Stacey, thank you very much. And I'm really happy to hear that we changed the all happening in Israel to top events that happening in Israel, because we definitely cannot cover everything that happens in Israel in 15 minutes. So every time that I speak in front of you in this webinar, the most challenging thing is really to pick what is the most important to report on, because things happen all the time, and then you think what is the most important, geopolitically, economically, politically, militarily, and yes, I always pick usually 4 or 5 things, trying to really cover them fast. So that's exactly what I did this time, and if, in my opinion, we will speak about 5 things that I think are the major things that happened throughout the last week, and the first, definitely and foremost, and that's also what we included in our blurb in the topic of this webinar, is the murderous terror attack that we had in Tel Aviv on Shabbat, where a Palestinian terrorist from Jenin killed one of the security workers of the municipality, who saw him and understood that something is. They assumed that he might be a terrorist, and they approached him and started to check him, and he just took out his pistol, his gun, and just killed one of the security workers, and he died very soon in the hospital. And when giving this webinar's topic, I thought that it will be very important to see if Israeli society, after such a terrorist attack, will overcome the splits and arguments that take place in the Israeli society for the last months, and will unite, understanding who is the real enemy. Now, why this time is different, even though this is definitely not the first terror attack that happens in Israel, and definitely even not first terror attack that happens since the judicial reform started, and these tensions within the Israeli society took place because of the reform. But this time, I think it was important to see, because I remind you that this time, throughout the last few weeks, we saw a phenomenon that we didn't see before, a phenomenon where Israeli reserve soldiers and officers announced that they will not volunteer to the reserve army service, because they oppose to the reform, and if the reform will pass, if the cancellation of the reasonableness clause will pass, so they will not volunteer. So I think overall, this terror attack, for very short time, did remind Israelis who is the enemy and that we must be united. But overall, we really see a much lower tension throughout the last 2 weeks, since the close past, and since the Knesset left to reset, which will be until the middle of October. So overall, we see, that the fire is is downgraded, and we feel, I cannot say that the situation is calm, but it's definitely not on its peak how it was before the close passed. And as we spoke a week ago, everybody is waiting. I think the next stop, in this tour is the hearing of the Supreme Court on September 12th concerning this decision of the Knesset, this cancellation of the Knesset. So everybody's waiting. Meanwhile, we saw last week another hearing in the Supreme Court concerning the incapacity of the Prime Minister. I want just to remind it briefly. Before the last March, it was for few years, we saw that the question of incapacity of Prime Minister since Olmert's trials was shifted to a responsibility of the government legal advisor, who could, in case if Prime Minister is involved in trial in criminal accusations, could state that Prime Minister is in the state of incapacity, and therefore he must step down, and his deputy can replace him. In last March 2023, the government and the Knesset, the coalition, passed a law by which the incapacity of Prime Minister can be announced only by the Prime Minister himself, only in case of physical or health incapacity, meaning if he's ill or, God forbid, dead, or any physical and health inability. So those who are opposed to that, okay, and some say that with support of the opposition, sued to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court started the hearing if this new law that passed in March 2023 can, is it, reasonable? But now that we don't have the reasonableness clause, so if it's, if it can stand or it can be canceled. So the first hearing took place last week, and now on this Sunday, the Supreme Court announced that it postpones the hearing to the end of September, 29th of September, and expands the number of judges that will participate in this hearing to 11. So we have now actually two, let's say, next stops in the judicial reform tension, okay, and the tension between the coalition and opposition concerning the judicial system and concerning the authority of the Supreme Court versus the Knesset. These two hearings. If the Supreme Court will intervene, cancel the decision about the passing of the reasonableness clause in September 12th, and if the Supreme Court will cancel or intervene in passing the law, the correction concerning the incapacity of the Prime Minister in the end of September. This is now where we stand concerning the whole judicial reform and the tension, and everybody's waiting. And again, Knesset is on reset, so by definition there is no legislation. By definition, Knesset is much more quiet at this moment. Now, two things that I think we must mention that happened this week. is, first of all, definitely, and this is, if we go higher to the geopolitical and strategic, security and economic and geopolitical level for Israel, is the progress which we hear about in the negotiations between the United States and Saudi Arabia concerning the agreement, which will include the normalization with Israel. Now, we hear controversial reports. We hear different reports. In one, we hear that there are agreements. In the second, we hear that not. It shows us that there are negotiations. It shows us that there are different parts that try to, to make pressure through the media on the sides, on negotiations, on the public opinion concerning these negotiations. In Israel, there is a debate concerning the conditions by which Israel might or should not agree to this normalization. First and foremost is the dilemma and the issue concerning the peace nuclear program of Saudi Arabia, which some say we never know what will happen with this peace initiative in the future, and remind that the nuclear program of Iran also started from Iranian declaration that it will be a peace nuclear program, civil nuclear program. So also the issue of concessions to Palestinians, what it will include. Now, we hear from those who say that there are agreements between Saudis and Americans concerning the normalization, don't come with details about those concessions. By the way, another very interesting aspect in this is that the Palestinians themselves say that nobody spoke with them, that Saudis don't speak with them about this agreement, about the negotiations, don't update them and don't ask them what they want. I think we might make conclusion that it shows that the real interest of Saudis is not to care for Palestinians, but to appease maybe their local audience, because otherwise, why Palestinians are just out negotiations if they are the one who Saudis care for. I'm sure that this will continue. What is very, I think, yet already important to see that the very fact of these negotiations, I think, already strengthens Israel by the very fact that everybody understands that Saudis are not against Israel, that it's only about, satisfying their interests and not about some state of war or state of hatred, and that everything can be solved if only they get what they want. Another thing that I would like maybe to mention in the last 2 minutes that I have for my presentation is another also very big thing in the news in Israel during the last days is the decision of the finance minister Bezalel Smotrich to cut or to hold or to freeze, depending who you ask and who you hear the report from, the budget for education of Arabs living in East Jerusalem. Why? Because he says, listen, we must control these budgets to see that this money doesn't go to terror organization, to incitement within the schools, to incitement for terror. And also we see that that the universities and colleges where the Arabs live become a fruitful place for them to express their hatred against Israel, under the umbrella of liberal and liberal values and freedom of speech. So, and again, this is criticized, but the very fact that we see that these budgets are going to be controlled by the government. By the way, what Smotrich claims that in the previous government, where I remind you, Ram and Mansour Abbas were part of the government, Smotrich claims that the previous government also spoke about controlling these budgets. And I think that if we think, not politically, but concerning the policy and the risks of this, we will agree that these budgets definitely must be controlled and that the risks are real. So these were my 5 major news that I thought are the most important to bring to you, and I'm open to your questions, please.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So the first question we have is from Barak Korkmaz asking, do you expect a third Lebanon war?
I was asking myself, should I speak about it today as well? Because we spoke about it, I think, few minutes last time, and we had few questions about it. And I said last week, that in Israel, everybody understands that a military clash with Hezbollah is only a matter of time. Last week, we saw more and more provocations against Israel on the border, and I explained to you also geographically exactly where it happens and why it happens. But this week, we hear quiet. Now, very, very might be that, it's a result of some diplomatic work that happens behind the scenes. I also saw some report that Americans really press on Lebanon, to take control and connect it also to, possible maybe even normalization with Saudi Arabia, and maybe, Lebanon is getting something. Again, we don't know the details, but very, very might be that, by the way, very might be that the provocations of Hezbollah also are related to these negotiations. After all, everybody, plays his interests and pushes when he wants to get something bigger. I remind you that the agreement with Lebanon on the border in the sea for the gas to determine the border to let them explore the gas was also during these negotiations. Hezbollah also fired, if you remember, rockets. And they did that to press and show that, we first of all, they wanted to take credit, and they by the way, to take credit toward their audience in Lebanon. So when we see quiet, we understand that either people get what they want, or there are some negotiations. That's how I see the situation with Lebanon now. But again, if we should expect, you called it third Lebanon war, I think we should. And at least we should be ready for it. And if our readiness will deter, good. But if not, we should be ready for this. Yes.
Thank you. In regards to the reservists who said that they wouldn't show up to service in this terror attack, you said that at least for a short time, Israel has come together against a common enemy. Do you see that lasting?
It's a very good question. What is this short time? We fortunately and unfortunately, but Israeli society is, it's a very, very bad word, but used to. Okay, I could say that, we're strong enough, but we used to. So we, unfortunately, we're back to life very fast. Now, this is part of the resilience. This is part of the strength of, not to fall apart because of the terror attack. But this also a problem because we really, we move on to other problems. So what is this short-term I don't know. For some, it was maybe a few hours. For some, maybe was few days. For some, maybe its effect will be for months and years. I hope so. So yes, it happens every time. Every time, to some point, these the security threats unite Israel. So at some point, I always say that maybe the fact that we fight within us shows that the security situation overall is well. Yes, that, I hope I answered. It's a very controversial. What is the short term?
Absolutely. And in the past, we've had the question come up, is there any way to force these reservists into service, or since they're technically volunteers, they can't be forced?
Let me explain what that volunteering means, because I'm exactly on that volunteering. Okay, I'm a major in reserve in IDF, and I have reserve service every month. Okay, if it's not emergency or war, and if it's war, so all the operation, all the emergency, as I serve in a home front command in emergency information unit, which if there is emergency, either war or operation or earthquake, by the way, also included. So what we do, we explain to the public what to do, how to behave in media. So let me explain what's happening. It's not that, you volunteer when you want. You just come to the army and say, hey, I want to volunteer. Yeah, let me do something. Or if they need you, they call you and say, do you want to come? Or you don't want to come? Do you have a mode or time today? That's not the way it works. The way it works that you sign. Some sign once a year, some sign once in few years, some sign once in 5 years. And at the moment that you signed, you have position. It means that your unit count on you. Okay, if I sign once in few years, and my unit knows that if there is a war, that I'm assigned for a mission, so I'm committed, I'm obligated. So right, you can stop this volunteering. I can just write a letter and say, I decided not to volunteer. I think it will not be immediate. Again, maybe I even don't know. I even didn't check about myself. For some, it may be not immediate. For some, it's maybe immediate. But again, it's not that you hurt the ability of the army because they count on you, because it's volunteering means that you continue to serve after the age or after army says you don't have to. But if you say I want, they relate to you as you are in full capacity, in full position. So in these terms, now I'm getting to the answer. So you cannot you cannot force if you are already in this volunteering, meaning signing an agreement with the army that you can volunteer, even though you're not obliged, even though you're not committed. So by law, if I can resign, I can resign. So you cannot come and say by law, you must, if his agreement didn't include that, he has to end the period of time. Maybe one of the things that the army should consider is that if I sign, let's say, for a year, I cannot leave until this year ends, because I sign and I cannot be replaced easily. Let's say even though I believe that my position is very important, but pilot is not less important, and pilot cannot be switched or replaced easily. So there are things that I think maybe army now will consider how to to get them more committed. And I don't want to say force, because we are people's army. We serve because we believe that it's important. So I don't want to say the word to force, but to let him finish the obliged, the committed period, and only then you can resign.
Thank you so much for explaining that out for us. I really appreciate it. So you talked about the incapacitation being talked about in the Supreme Court, but being postponed until the end of September. Was there any rationalization to that? Because Knesset's on break?
No, I think that first of all, the Supreme Court in this hearing asked, the hearings, if you're familiar with court procedures and hearings, hearings always have, few stages, 1, 2, 3, 4, because, the court hears first time and then court sends the parties, with homework, okay, to complete answers, to complete materials. And also because the court decided, as I said, to expand the number of judges to 11. I think that because of all the tension and because of all the crisis, court says, listen, this is a big issue, definitely in this timing. So let's have much bigger number of judges in order to, if we make some decision, it must be, wide, as we said, about the disagreements. We need a wide agreement. So the judges also here say, listen, this is a very controversial hearing and issue. So let's have wider agreement in this hearing and in this discussion.
Thank you. And your last point was about the decision of the finance minister to freeze the budget for Arabs living in Jerusalem, the education. Sorry. Can you expand on that? I know that you only had 2 minutes to talk about that, but that seems like a pretty important topic.
Yeah, well, this is a very important topic, and it's first of all, it has, also you understand that it has political incentive and element, because I think that even if Smotrich understand that these funds should be passed, for his target audience, for his voters, for his crowd, he understands that he must show that he doesn't give it easily, okay, that he understands that there are risks that this money will go for terrorist organizations. But also, I think there is something else here. And you should remember that, those who live in East Jerusalem, they don't have Israeli citizenship, but they do have Jerusalem citizenship. They are citizens of Jerusalem, and they receive services from municipality of Jerusalem. And it also means that they can vote for mayor of Jerusalem or for the municipality in the local municipal elections, which next, by the way, are in October, upcoming October. Some people, and within, Israeli establishments, political, economical, social, religious, there is always this dilemma, okay, what we do with the Arabs of East Jerusalem? Do we want to let them integrate? And then if they integrate, they will vote to the mayor in Jerusalem, or we don't want them to integrate. Now, if they vote, and today they don't vote because they just boycott these elections. If tomorrow they vote, you must understand, if they vote in the same percentage as Jews, the day is not far when we can have Arab mayor in Jerusalem. So some may say, let's not integrate them. Not because this integration might mean political integration, political, living the political life in Israel, while they are not citizens. So non-citizens if they integrate, might determine the identity of the mayor of the capital city, which is a very big political thing. I think part of this dilemma comes from this. Part of this dilemma comes, I think, from as exactly as the minister says, we must control this money. And also, should we give people who continue to support the incitement against Israel this money? Shouldn't we condition these budgets and demand, end of incitement? Big part of the educational system in East Jerusalem is Palestinian, including incitement against Israel. So some may claim, and I think this claim is definitely right, why we give money to those who don't stop hating us, and how we control it and how we change it. So if we have budgets, let's change this formula.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We've come to the close of our webinar and podcast. Alex, thank you so much for taking time to update us this week.
Thank you very much.
Of course. For our viewers and listeners, please join us Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern for a webinar with Nasser Kader discussing making sense of Quran burnings in Sweden and Denmark. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.